the North Zonal rounds of the Mind Wars Mumbai Debate Championship 2021. And today we'll watch the top 8 debaters of the North Zone in Mumbai compete to win their spots in the City Grand Finale on the 18th. Before we jump in to watch our quarterfinal rounds, I wanted to quickly introduce our guest for today. Joining me on this panel will be Janvi Sen, the Deputy Editor and Executive News Producer of The Wire. She's the editor of #Grit, a special project on manual scavenging and sanitation. She received a grant from the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting for a series of articles on India's prisons. She has a bachelor's degree from Stephens University in philosophy and a master's degree in development studies from the Graduate Institute for International and Development Studies, Geneva. The motion before the floor for the first quarterfinal reads, the film industry should not make shows or movies that idealize the police. Speaking in favor, we have Laisha Dogra from RIMS International School. And on opposition, we have Ritik Kotaria from Chhatrabhuj Narsi Memorial School.
Shows and movies play a huge role in our life, now more than ever. Because of this, the film industry is arguably one of the most influential sectors of modern society. These shows can influence millions of people, their thoughts, their emotions, their mindsets. And this is just the power of one simple movie. The power of that influence comes with a very thin line of motivated perception and reality. And yes, it also comes with responsibility. Cop shows happen to be one of the topics that straddle that very fine line. Although they have different narrative aims and audiences, as I said before, these events have a huge impact on the audience, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And this is when the shows get triggering. In conclusion, unrealistic expectations, wrongful propagation, normalization and desensitization of viewers are only a few named influences of effects of the cop shows. Thank you.
The film industry is one of the most impactful and influential sectors in modern society. It not only provides entertainment but can also be instrumental in influencing the impressionable minds. It revolves and touches many aspects of our lives. Let us analyze the role of the film industry in idealizing the police force and its positive aspects. The respect for the police forces in the eyes of the people increases remarkably, and they indeed deserve our appreciation and respect for their service. At times, they are even ready to lay down their lives in crossfires and battles between the good and the evil, between the police and the criminals, all the while putting the nation at first. This idealization portrays the general face of the police force, which actually forms the backbone of security of any modern society. We should be proud of our police force, and the film industry should make movies and shows that idolize the police. Thank you.
Laisha, my question is for you. A number of people already think of the police as incredibly corrupt and unwilling to take action. In comparison, if there was mass media telling you that the police actually is willing to take action and help out the downtrodden, would they not be more willing to report problems to the police?
Okay, so you did rightly say that a lot of people will be a little hesitant towards approaching a police officer if they've shown as corrupt. But here's the thing, the realities of today of the police, like we should not be on the extreme side, which is they are good or that they are corrupt. We should be like reality.
Thank you, Laisha. That was really well answered.
Thank you.
Hi Ritik, my question's for you. So I think you must have noticed that society to a certain extent already considers police officers and people like soldiers to be heroes. So this is something that society already thinks. In that case, we find it very difficult to criticize the things that they do. How then do you propose that we bring about this criticism? And do you not think it would be better instead to show some of the difficulties that they face and some of the difficulties that people face while interacting with them, just to show that yes, these are problems that do exist?
So what I think is that a picture of the police should be painted in their favor, but not like a rosy picture with them being flawless. So I feel that the realities could be highlighted, but not in such a case where the film focuses only on the realities. The reality is too harsh for anyone to bear. The public may not respond positively to the actual reality that exists. Thank you.
So first, we thought both of you did really well, and congratulations. That was brilliant. Unfortunately, we have to pick one of you, and so it took us a while to come to this decision. But we're going to give this debate to Laisha, to the proposition. Congratulations.
The motion for the second quarterfinal reads, governments should make politicians and their families only use public services. Speaking in favor of the topic, we have Aditya Jain from Vibgyor High. And on opposition, we have Janmejay Singh from RIMS International.
Politicians understanding the status quo of public services without any measurable understanding or without experiencing the quality of such services provided by the government is still a thick mystery. Firstly, a public service is a service which is provided by the government by either financing the public sector or by providing private provisions, of course. Basically a service helping others. So, politicians of the ruling party must be entitled to use these public services as the whole situation where these politicians and rich civil officers give public provisions but themselves use private services sounds ironical and in many ways suspicious. A prominent question arises that are politicians themselves not ready to use these public services which they provide in the name of so-called public welfare? Politicians and civil servants sell their children to private schools, so public schools are not a priority for them. Every morning and night, our people are packed into taxis, buses, trains like sardines. The townships are generally badly serviced. But these politicians have big subsidies to buy cars worth millions. The houses are small and the millions are forced to live into shacks. The so-called houses made by a so-called government are worse than matchboxes. So, yes, politicians are humans, but they are people with a special responsibility. If they not use a public service, then how will they understand that the service provided by the government are viable and actually help the common man? Them using these services is not a force or a punishment, but a responsibility. We must demand and convene into this issue and draft new law ensuring that these politicians and public servants use public services for the betterment and the development of nations around the world, keeping in mind of a goal of a real welfare state. Thank you.
Who will benefit if politicians and their families started using only public services? Of course, the politicians and their families, but public services are services intended to serve all members of a community regardless their income, physical ability or their mental acuity, meaning these services are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. If government forces politicians to only use public goods, what will happen? These policies are implemented without considering their public servant situations. If politicians are allowed to only consume public goods, with having the income to purchase private goods, which are excludable and rivalrous, it will restrict them to spend only on public goods, which is unfair. In conclusion, the government shouldn't make politicians and their families only use public services. This implementation has many adverse effects. This policy is affecting many people and will affect departments in the government posts. Thank you.
Aditya, I have a question for you. As a politician, I want my kid to learn Shakespeare in school. But what's really important for people from low socioeconomic backgrounds is for their kids to learn functional English. So what you're doing by putting politicians as kids in these schools and forcing them to go there is you're misaligning incentives and making politicians think about their own interest rather than the public interest. How would you balance that out?
Sure. When we talk about public interest and about the interest of politicians, here's the thing. We are trying to bridge a gap here. We are trying to make these low socio-economic factors, seem to be as much as capable of becoming well-trained officials or politicians. Does it really mean that if a politician's kid learns with a less socioeconomic kid, we are misaligning incentives? Instead, we are in a way trying to make two type of backgrounds, economic backgrounds, come together so that the country can move forward together. Because both can learn together, not only politically, not only economically, but socially too. So I don't think that more than incentives, all public services provide good incentives. And if these politicians really use them, then I think that it can be a really good factor for the country's development. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Aditya.
Hi, Janmaja. My question is for you. At the moment, people who use public services are ones who can't afford what you call the better private options, which are people who come from poorer socioeconomic backgrounds. So why is that okay? But to say that the people who are supposed to be making public services better, which is the government and the people who work for the government, including politicians, why would it be unfair to have them use them as well, since it is technically their responsibility to be making those services better, as when the people who use them now have no hand in how these services work?
If people who are public servants, the kids, they grow, they get smarter. Now they can open an NGO and help the government school kids to help them get a better education, which will help all over the government schools. If they study together, they will just follow their rules and just be there and find a normal job. But if people are more qualified, they will help out government schools and all and donate them to get their education better and all.
Unfortunately, we do have to come to a result, and after deliberation, we decided that the side going through is side proposition, that's Aditya.
For quarterfinal 3, the motion before the floor reads, in India, all public schools should use English as their first language or language of instruction and not regional languages like Tamil, Malayalam, Marathi, etc. On proposition, we have Adi Narvekar from the Children's Academy. And speaking on opposition, we have Anahat Singh Johari from JBCN International School.
My first argument is that it is essential to have English as our first language because of its global spread. English is one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. English has become a part of our life no matter in which country we live. It crosses cultures, countries, and industries. If we want to be well informed, up to date, we must learn and speak the universal language, English. Considering all above points, it is essential that all public schools use English as their first language. My second argument is that it is important to learn English as a first language from childhood. Young children tend to learn languages faster, hence they can learn English in schools in this critical period, along with learning regional languages at home. If we learn English from a young age, we will think in English while we talk it. India is a diverse country and has many languages, so making one language as the national language is difficult. So let's make English our first language, giving our citizens more exposure to the rest of the world, as well as conversing with other people in India. In conclusion, English holds a large part in the communication. So it is important to learn English as our first language and be fluent in it. Proud to support. Thank you.
It is extremely important to let the public schools have the regional language as the first language of instruction, and my following arguments will explain why. My first argument is about the fact that making English as the language of instruction will make it so that students are not able to understand and express their thoughts fluently. Students will also fall behind academically. Now for my arguments. Public schools in India have very little funding, often have a bad quality of education, and in the sad reality of India, only the extremely poor attend these schools. More often than not, these children's parents have received little to no education and cannot speak English, as it is not a commonly used language in the poor areas of India. This reflects on the children, and they can only use a regional language which is used to communicate with the majority. For example, a child brought up in Mumbai will only know languages such as Hindi and Marathi. Converting all schools to an English medium school will impede on the child's learning, as it will make them harder for them to understand the matter and make it harder for them to express themselves. This will make students motivation to learn decrease. This will make it so that students will not want to attend school anymore, they will not want to learn anymore, and this will highly affect unemployment rates, increasing them by a lot. Thank you.
So the two questions are, one, how do you ensure that people don't face this sort of shame when they can't speak English properly? And two, how would you propose that parents are now able to help their children?
As I said in my argument that students should learn English from a young age, because it is a critical period in which they can learn languages and grasp the languages very quickly. And about the parents, the students can learn from their neighbors, like there will be an elder brother or sister, or the neighbors will have an older child, so they can learn from them as they are already in the next grade or a few grades above them, so they will be able to teach them. So this can be the solution for this policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, Anahat, my question is for you. If public schools are teaching only in regional languages, often we see this happening, that even poorer families spend money they don't have, sending their children to private schools that are English medium. So how do you balance that then poor families are in fact choosing to send their children to private schools that may not even be academically better than the public schools, just because they teach in English, and therefore spending a lot more money for their children's education that they perhaps cannot afford?
First of all, in my speech, it was mentioned that the government should put a lot more emphasis on the English language as a subject, more than they do now, which will still allow others learners to learn fluent English without sacrificing the understanding of other subjects right from the start. Also, it is highly unlikely that people in poverty go outside the nation or go to another country where they speak English just for a job, as they do not have that kind of funding for travel, and they do not have that kind of higher education where they can go to different jobs. And as of in the region that they are in, most people will already be speaking the regional language, which means that they will be able to manage with the language that they already know.
Unfortunately, we did have to pick a winner. And we were in consensus, even though it was by a really small margin, that we think Anahat from opposition goes through to the next round. The motion for the fourth quarterfinal reads, governments should ban the future breeding and sale of pets except in cases of necessity, like when we need guide dogs for the blind, police and airport sniffer dogs, etc. Speaking on proposition from RIMS International School, Kanishka Chawla, and speaking in opposition from Children's Academy, Adi Narvekar.
In this speech, I'm going to be laying emphasis on how animal breeding and sale of pets plays a part towards animal cruelty, as well as sustainable alternatives to supporting pet stores. One of the main exploitation modules for animal breeders is genetic manipulation. In case of dogs, different breeds of animals are forced to mate, giving painful birth to what are known as exotic dogs. Moving from breeding mills, these animals face severe heartlessness and negligence from pet stores. The alternative to sale of pets would be animal shelters. Adoption homes are overflooded with many denied dogs from pet stores. These dogs usually have differentiated qualities about them, having lost their hearing ability, sight, and other bodily disabilities, mostly due to the vicious treatment of backyard breeding. Adoption becomes a better way to give these poor pets a second chance to life. This also helps in supporting millions of dedicated social workers committed to uplift lives of these animals. So I would just like to plant a little seed of thought in your mind. Imagine it's your little creature going through these conditions. What would your stance be on this motion? Thank you.
Why are pets important? Pets, especially dogs and cats, can reduce stress, anxiety, and lower blood pressure. They reduce loneliness and encourage exercise. Caring for animals can help children grow up to be more secure and active. Pets are great companions for older adults. Considering the importance of pets, now the next question is from where to get the right pet. The option is to get it from a reputed breeder or a stray dog. Get pets from reputed breeders, then why to ban them? A ban would affect the breeders who have taken hard efforts to run this business. Ban would deprive them of their income, which they get from breeding. Breeders have spent a lot of money to build this business. This ban would make it difficult to preserve the breeds. This market, like every other market which needs to be regulated, for example, dogs, we have Breeding and Sale Welfare Act of 1999. So, this can be very well regulated by rules and policies. The breeders are supposed to register themselves with the State Animal Welfare Board and take a license. As per the policy, every breeder should be maintaining records of sale of pets, name of purchaser, and other necessary details. If rules and policies are not followed, then strict action should be taken against the breeders. Proud to oppose. Thank you.
Kanishka, my question is for you, and I think as opposition pointed out as well, there are a number of regulations that you could slap onto breeders as well as pet store owners, given that having a pet can be quite an important way to empathize with animals and care for animal rights overall.
So the regulations already imposed do not seem to have an effect on the animal breeders, since research suggests that the forceful breeding and mating of animals still exists to date. And this impacts the animals in a negative way, harming their mental and physical health. Coming to the incentives part of this, people purchasing pets do have incentives of ensuring that their pets have adequate veterinary care provided to them before they are entered in their house, which are more often than not provided by these pet stores and animal breeders, since they frankly lack the care and concern and the finances as well to provide the adequate care required. Plus, the main incentive behind this becomes profit, which is reduced if you provide such expensive incentives to the dogs. So hence, they cut out on these steps to ensure that they maximize their own returns. Thank you.
Right now, adoption shelters have pets that look ugly because they're hurt and suffering, whereas pet stores and breeders have very good-looking, high pedigree pets. If now I banned pet breeding and sale, someone like Namita or Janvi won't be allowed to buy a pet anymore. All they can do is adopt a pet. Then the pets who are suffering get adopted. Isn't that a world where the more pets in need are catered to, rather than creating new pets for rich people?
Pets who need the healthcare will get adopted by the rich people because they want a pet. Even if we ban them, the pets who need help will get help. And if we don't ban them, the rich people will get their pets who are well bred and pedigree pets, so they will get them, they will take care of them. Whereas on the other hand, the people who want to adopt, they will adopt the pets and still care for them as much as the rich people do. So it will be the same and the pets will get adopted. There will be no difference.
Unfortunately, we had to pick a winner, and this time we're going to go with proposition. Kanishka, congratulations.